Okay. Kind of a different style of video for me, but I kind of just want to review every episode from season 1 of The Loud House. Now that encompasses 52 episodes, but I promise I probably don't have much to say about the majority of them. It's really just sort of an opportunity for me to go over my thoughts about the show in a little bit more detail. So, I watched them in the Netflix order. I don't know if that's like the correct order, but it looks like it's the same on here, with Homespun being last and Left in the Dark being first. So I think it's fine. Um, so yeah, I mean, let's just get into it. Episode 1, Left in the Dark. It's fine. You know, it does a fine job of introducing us to all the characters. Um, I don't have much else to say about it. It is honestly just like the first episode. Get the message. This is the first, this is the second episode, but it's the first example of the siblings of the Loud House being abjectly horrible to each other because while I think Laurie was quite mature in this situation, she breaks Lincoln's like VR thing, I think it was, and then she buys him a new one, right? Lincoln, on the other hand, the voicemail that he sends is actually, it's, I mean, we don't hear it, but it, I mean, it sounds pretty bad. And the fact that he had this whole monologue laid out ahead of time, that I mean, kids can be horrible, so I'm not saying it's unrealistic, but it is an aspect of the show that I don't like, is when the, like, obviously there's bickering, there's fighting, but I don't like when they're being completely horrible to each other. Heavy Metal. This is an episode I have a lot of thoughts about. I think it's bad. So Lincoln is getting picked on by a bully. He doesn't want his sisters to know because he doesn't want them to get involved. Primarily because he doesn't want people to know that he's being bullied by a girl. Now, that would be a thing on its own. Like, that plot on its own is not like the worst thing ever, but what I don't like is that this bully that's picking on him is Ronnie Ann. And Ronnie Ann is later Lincoln's girlfriend. They kind of date this season. And this is something that makes me really, like, uncomfortable because it's like there's sort of no conclusion to this sort of bullying arc for Ronnie, because, like, she still does it later on. Like, she's still not kind to him normally, you know? Like, the conclusion of the episode isn't, oh, Ronnie Ann learns not to bully people if she likes them. The conclusion of the episode is, oh, she actually just liked him. Like, there's no like criticism of her behavior here. It's literally just, oh, maybe you shouldn't. And another thing is that, like, when they find out, when the sisters find out that it's a girl, they're all like, oh my god, she loves you, instead of like being legitimately concerned that she like punched him in the face and stuff. Like, that is kind of a problem. So I didn't like that. Making the case, this is another example of Lincoln being horrible to his sisters. I didn't really find this funny. He makes like a clip show of his sisters doing like embarrassing stuff. A lot of the time it's in like private, like literally recording them in their bedrooms, which is kind of weird. And it gets a lot of views on like the YouTube equivalent of this series, but it also seems to be like local to their school, because it's not like it was a viral video. It's more like everybody at school saw it. So I don't know about that. Yeah, I didn't like that part so much, but I like that in this episode Lincoln takes responsibility. Because in Get the Message, he doesn't. He just tries to erase the voicemail instead of like apologizing for it or anything. in making the case, he actually does sort of take responsibility by apologizing to them first and foremost, but he also sort of uploads his embarrassing clip reel that Luan had recorded. Um, so I think that's quite a good conclusion to that episode. So it's not a bad episode, but I did not find it very funny. Driving Miss Hazy, this is probably a good episode. Like, if I'm being honest, it's probably one of the first like good episodes from here. Driving Miss Hazy is an episode where Laurie is kind of being militant. She's asking everyone in the family to do chores and stuff for her so that she will drive them places because she's the only person that has a driving license. Lincoln's like, hey, Lenny's old enough to drive. Why doesn't she have a driver's license? It turns out that it's because she's stupid. But they figure out that what they have to do is they have to like speak her language, right? Like she doesn't understand the cars, but she understands shoes and she understands, like fashion. So they kind of work with that. And I thought that was kind of an interesting way to sort of deal with that. So I thought that was quite good. And also, Laurie is like worried that she's actually going to have to do her own chores. So she like sabotages Lenny's driving test. But actually, she also takes accountability. She's like, sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Like it is actually another episode where the person who does something wrong ends up taking accountability for it. And that's something I like because in Heavy Metal and Get the Message, we don't have that. No guts, no glory. Laurie's tyranny as babysitter prompts Lincoln and the rest of his sisters to plot rebellion. So this is, I don't know, it's almost like Cat in the Hat in a way. It's like they're like, oh my god, Laurie's so like she's like, she's tyrannical. She's making us all go to bed on time and not like make a mess of the house. And Lincoln's like, well, this sucks, so we're gonna tie her up and I'm gonna be the leader. I'm gonna let you do anything you want. And they do that and they realize, oh shit, the house is like messed up, this is terrible. So he goes to Laurie and is like, I'm sorry, like I didn't appreciate how big of a task this is and I want to fix it. And then you have this like Cat in the Hat moment where the house is all messed up, but they managed to fix it. You got like Thing 1 and Thing 2 coming out. Obviously, it's not like a direct parallel, but I thought that was quite good. So I think No Guts, No Glory is also quite good. The Sweet Spot. Lincoln plans on taking the Sweet Spot, the best seat in the family wagon. This is really fun to sort of follow the whole like scheme he's got going on. There's so many conditions and stuff, but he puts in so much effort, stressing himself out to get this nice spot in the car that he wants, where he's not around the bad sisters, for example. Like I think it was Laurie or Lenny, one of those two, they like puke in the car. So he's like, okay, I don't want to be near them. Or like, oh, there's a broken speaker here, so I don't have to listen to the songs that his dad puts on or something like that. So it's kind of cool to follow. He's like, oh, he talks to, I think, like, I don't know. He talks to his sisters. He's like, "Well, you sit next to me," and they're like, "Yeah, I'll sit." But he talks to Lola. I think he's like, "Yeah, I'll sit next to you, but I don't want to be sitting beside Laurie or something like that." So he goes through and he seats out the whole thing for the entire family, basically. But the problem is that they find out what he's up to, that he has the nice spot. So basically, they kind of get in a fight about that, and then none of them get it. Basically, they end up it's a really cartoony moment, but they end up physically destroying the car in their fight for the sweet spot. So it's kind of awesome because I like watching him put in all this effort because it's really fun to follow all of that effort and then watch it kind of be taken away from him, because ultimately it's kind of about greed, I guess. But honestly, it was just kind of an entertaining episode to watch. Tale of Two Tables was kind of boring. The problem with it was that he wants to go to the grown-up table. The grown-up table's boring, so he wants to get away from it. The problem is that the Kiddie Table's not funny to watch because you've got these people like throwing food at each other, shitting in their chairs or something. That's not entertaining for me to watch. And then they go to the grown up table and there are no jokes. Like, that's the whole thing. It's like, it's boring. And, yeah, that's even worse. So, like, honestly, it's just not an entertaining episode to watch. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just not that good, is it? Project Loudhouse. This is this reminds me of the first episode, because in the first episode, Lincoln wants to watch TV, so he has to find ways to distract all of his sisters. Um, like uh, he gives them things to occupy themselves, basically. And in Project Loudhouse, it's kind of similar to that, where he is taking the responsibility to make sure that every sister gets ready on time for school so that he can take his project with him in one piece so that it doesn't get destroyed on the way out. Unfortunately, it does get destroyed um, because his sisters are quite rowdy. But it's okay because they make it up to him by physically showing up to his class to be the physical demonstration. So it's quite a fun episode. Intense debate. It's not. It's not a very good episode. It's kind of just basically Lincoln gets waited on hand and foot by two groups of his family, right? Because they want because Lincoln's the tiebreaker in this argument, and they want to go to different places for their family vacation. So they're waiting on him hand and foot. They're like, delivering him stuff and all this. He's got like a bell for them to like show up and be waitresses for him or whatever. And this is not interesting to watch. So we get to the second half of the episode where instead of that, they're just sabotaging the other team. And that's not fun to watch either, because it's literally just Lincoln having a bad day, which we'll get to with the April Fool's episode, but it is literally just Lincoln having a bad day. And I'm not really that interested in that. So I didn't think it was a great episode. I did like some of the characterization moments. I mean, you get like, obviously they're split into two sides, and it was interesting to see which characters want to go here, which characters want to go to the beach, whatever. And honestly, like, they set up at the beginning of the episode, our parents would never let us go to Dairyland or whatever. So I kind of expected the episode to be about them trying to convince their parents, and instead it wasn't. It was them trying to convince Lincoln, which doesn't make a huge difference, honestly, but it's something interesting. Sound of Silence. It's kind of a silly episode, because the thing is, the whole premise of the episode is Lincoln ignores his sisters, so they take revenge on him. But honestly, can you blame Lincoln for wanting to have a bit of like peace to himself? Like, it's kind of like, it's weird, because like, what's the point they're trying to make? They punish him for trying to have some alone time in his room. Like, I don't know, it's weird. Space Invader. Lynn and Lucy have a fight. It's an okay episode. I liked that Lynn and Lucy missed each other. I like that aspect where it's like, because it's really real, like, siblings fight, but at the end of the day, they like each other. They're still friends. And it was kind of like this whole, they have to have this mature moment where they're able to talk to each other about why they had a fight in the first place, like, kind of get past that thing. So that was quite good. Picture Perfect, just kind of like a teaching moment, I guess, that Lincoln keeps trying to make this perfect family photo, and in doing that, he kind of takes away everything that makes his family themselves. And so he realizes by the end that actually the perfect family photo would be of them being all rowdy and being themselves, basically. So I don't know, it's kind of a good moment, but I don't remember it being that funny. Under Pressure, this is a really goofy episode where all the characters are trying to not do their habits. So you have Lucy, I think she was actually the first to lose, or like the second. She has to not scare people. Lisa has to not explode anything. Lily has to not cry. And ultimately, they end up winning because Lily didn't cry. But then at the end of the episode, they're like, you know what, Lincoln? It's not fair for us to try and change who you are, which is kind of the whole plot of Picture Perfect now that you think about it. So it's interesting that these are wrapped in a little bow there. I didn't notice that, but now that I'm thinking about it. Link or Swim, God, boring. I don't really care about this episode. Changing the Baby. Oh yeah, this is the episode where everybody wants to be Lily's friend because Lily's like this blank canvas or empty slate, um, and it's kind of messed up. Like it's on the one hand where like sharing your interests with your little sister is a nice thing to do. It's on the other hand where taking up all of this little baby's time for a bunch of people to like argue over who gets to sort of like manipulate her interests is a really strange thing. It wasn't a bad episode. I enjoyed watching it just because like it was interesting to see like Lincoln's trying to get this baby to play video games. Lucy's trying to get this baby to be a vampire. I don't know. It was kind of interesting. Clyde comes to have a sleepover with Lincoln. Yeah, this is like this is an episode where I kind of see where Lincoln's coming from. Lincoln spends all of his life with his 10 sisters, and Clyde comes over. He just wants to spend time with his friend, and instead his friend Clyde wants to spend time with his sisters because they're cool. Which, like, I can see where both people are coming from. Like, you know, why leave out the sisters if Clyde's having fun, but also Lincoln spends all the time with them. He just wanted to spend time with his friends. So I honestly see where both are coming from. So, you know, Lincoln was kind of being like a bit over enthusiastic. He was like planning out every hour of the day, and that certainly did not. That was a bit excessive, but like I see where he's coming from. Ties that bind. Lincoln overhears a conversation between his parents and mistakenly believes that they want to get rid of him and his sisters. I don't like this episode. I kind of like this episode. I don't like the premise that it's all based on they misheard one thing, but I did like watching them try to like fight over who's gonna get kicked out. That was quite good. Hand Me Downer. I don't have much to say about this episode. Slither consequences. After the toilet gets clogged and overflows, everyone's grounded. Right, okay, I do have things to say about this episode. This episode, the plot was way too obvious. I could see it coming the moment, like the first 2 minutes, I knew the outcome. However, I did like it for its characterization of Lucy, because this is a broader problem that the show has. I mean, it's season 1, so it has time to change, but I do feel like most of the time the characters do not. The characters don't move away from their archetype enough. Like, Lenny is just stupid. Lola is just a pageant queen. Lana is just not a pageant queen. However, in Slither Consequences, we have this premise where the toilet's been clogged, everybody has to stay home until the person who did it admits to it. And Lincoln's like, you know, suspect, the prime suspect, and Lincoln's like, well, it wasn't me. And Lucy's like, why don't we go and try and like investigate who it is? And it was at that moment I was like, okay, it's probably Lucy. Because why would she volunteer to do that? And I was right, it was Lucy. How did she clog the toilet? She flushed what effectively was a My Little Pony book down the toilet. But this is a moment that I like, because this is a moment of Lucy moving away from this stoic emo character or like goth character to being, to having other interests. So I liked that characterization moment, that she actually liked My Little Pony, but she wasn't ready to admit to that because she wasn't fully comfortable with that part of her identity, which is why in the end Lincoln ended up taking the fall for clogging the toilet. He was like, it's My Little Pony book, like I love My Little Pony, because he as the older brother is confident enough in himself to say that, because he doesn't really mind if people think that about him. But Lucy, as like an 8-year-old, might be a bit embarrassed about it. So I thought that was a good moment. He was like, I'm like, I'll take the fall for you if you're not comfortable enough to admit it. That's a good older brother moment. This was a good episode. Butterfly effect. After spilling an experiment of Lisa's, Lincoln sets off a chain reaction that unravels the household. Now, I don't even remember this episode. I don't know what happens in this. Oh, this is the one where it's all in his head, like it's a dream. I don't care about that. That didn't even like happen. In an effort to be more energy efficient, Lincoln rallies his family to stop using so much electricity. This is interesting because on the one hand, being eco is an objectively good thing. On the other hand, Lincoln was not doing it for objectively good reasons. He was literally only doing it to save his social standing, but he didn't care about the environment because he was happy to make other people's lives worse. He took away all of the sort of like all of Laurie's screens and stuff, like the electricity that other people were using. He turned off the TVs and stuff, but he himself was still using his laptop to play this video game because he was being selfish. He wanted to meet the goal, but he didn't want to give up what everyone else was. So it was kind of a moment. Obviously, at the end, he learns and he grows from it, however much he can grow. Lincoln is given the responsibility of taking home his class's pet tarantula. This episode's kind of boring. Basically, Lenny doesn't like spiders, so they try to hide it, but everyone else likes spiders. The spider goes missing. They think the spider dies, but it didn't. Think he has worse chores. Lincoln goes on strike. I don't care about that. I guess it's kind of like this communist thing where like if none of them do their chores, nothing gets done. The quality of life is worse. So Lincoln kind of like, they all together sort of learned that if we all do our chores, our quality of life is better, so we have to rely on each other. So I guess that's cool. Forbo's about to rock. Lincoln goes to attend his first rock concert. I liked this because the sisters all had like horror stories about Luna being at their first concerts, which it's kind of sad because that was a ruined experience for them, but also Luna was just trying to be supportive and she's really enthusiastic. But in the end, Clyde and Lincoln end up enjoying the experience more because Luna was there and she was so enthusiastic. They managed to sort of like get that passion from her. So that was a really good episode, honestly. It's a loud, 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 loud house. Letter in the attic. This was kind of a cute episode. They all bicker over money. In the end, they work together, and it was all set up by the father. I thought it was quite nice that he sort of gave up his work bonus for the month to make that happen. It was kind of like, it was a good parent moment, I guess. I really like their parents. I think they're pretty cool. Toads and tiaras. Oh god, I hate this. Okay. The episode is super bad because it's basically just comes down to Lola gets injured, but Lincoln wants the prize for the pageant. So Lana does it, but she doesn't like it. and then they win anyway. And here's the thing, it could have been a good character moment for Lana to get away from her like archetype if she was like, you know what, I don't like this. Like, I don't want to be a pageant queen, but this isn't so bad, you know? It's not the end of the world. I can't, like, you know, she could be like, you know, it's not for me, but I enjoyed it. And that would be a moment for her to get away from her sort of archetype and bond with her sister Lola over that sort of connection where like they've both now lived it, and even if Lana doesn't want to keep doing it, she can sort of appreciate where the enthusiasm comes from, you know. So I think it'll be easy. Lincoln and Clyde decide to take on the task of babysitting Lily. I don't really remember this episode being that bad. Cover girls. I enjoyed watching them all sort of pretend to be each other in the call with Lincoln's grandfather. But one moment that was incredibly sad to me is when we saw it from his perspective, and he could barely see in front of him because he didn't have his glasses on. That was honestly kind of sad. Um, that they had basically taken advantage of that fact. Like, obviously, it's not that dramatic, but honestly, it felt kind of sad to me because he just wanted to talk to his like grandkids, and he kind of got that experience. It was a goofy way to do it. Bobby and Laurie go on a double date with Lincoln and Bobby's little sister, Ronnie Ann. This is an episode where Lincoln is like, I don't want to date Ronnie Ann. Ronnie Ann is mean and she's rude. And while he's not entirely being truthful to his feelings, because he does like Ronnie Ann, that's part of his character, I don't feel bad for Ronnie Ann in this episode because she's still like a bully, basically. Like, I don't think she's truly bullying him anymore, but I also don't remember her, like, ever having that character development to be like, yeah, I'm not a bully anymore, I'm a good person. Like, I don't remember, like, they never had that moment that sort of redeems her, which means I'm watching this episode where Lincoln is quite rightly saying, she's mean, she's rude, I don't want to date her. And I'm supposed to feel bad for Ronnie Ann anyway, so it was kind of a bad episode. Attention deficit, I think, is really good. It really, like, first of all, it was fun to see Clyde's dads because they're cool people, right? They have these interests. They're gay, which is, you know, always super based. So no, it was just cool to see more of them, more of Clyde's sort of lifestyle at home. But also, I like how it kind of it puts appreciation on Lincoln's parents for doing the fucking miracle work that they do, managing 11 children. Because by the end of it, Clyde's fathers are like, you guys gotta go home. We cannot handle 11 of you. And I like that they emphasize just, first of all, how much effort it takes for his parents to manage those 11 children, but also how by the end of it, you know, Lincoln's project does get done. Like, his parents still managed to find the time to spend it with him. So I thought that was good. Out on a Limo is this like class consciousness episode where Lincoln becomes part of a rich club thing, but he's not rich. He just got a free ride on a limo. And he sort of thinks he's better than everyone else because of it, because he's taught by this old rich guy that he is better than people because of his limo. And he abandons his sisters because of it, and then he learns that that's wrong, and being rich doesn't make you a better person. So that's quite a good episode, honestly. House music, it's goofy. I mean, they all start a band. Luna thinks it's bad, and she wants to impress Mick Swagger. But it turns out Mick Swagger was actually the person giving her advice. Like, it's goofy, but I kind of like that we got that concert where everybody's garbage. It was kind of fun to watch. This is kind of like, okay, Lincoln admits to his fault at the end, but it doesn't end up mattering. Like, I wish he had more consequences. He manages to lose his mother's novel, basically, that she's writing, and it gets destroyed in the process of him trying to get it back. And he's like, "Oh, sorry, mom, like I destroyed this." And she's like, "Well, that's terrible, but I want to start again anyway." So, like, yes, he admits that his wrongdoing, but there is no consequence to it, so it doesn't feel nearly as real. April Fool's Rules is the terrible episode. It's literally just an entire 10 minutes of Lincoln getting destroyed, like just a bunch of pranks, quote unquote, that Luan set up, but the literal, like, physical harm, like it's dangerous for him in this episode. So I mean, I'm not a fan of that. That was not good to watch. I did like the part where Ronnie Ann threw the pie at Luan, though. That kind of felt like she got some comeuppance, but not a lot, you know? Serial offender, not much to say about that. Girl, girl. This was a really funny episode because Lincoln should know. Lincoln has 10 sisters. He should know that they're all different. And yet he's still trying to give advice about girls, like dating advice, as if they're all the same. Like the same advice will apply to the same people. So it's really funny that he didn't make that connection. But it's not a funny episode. I don't think it's that good. Come Sail Away. Annual garage sale. This is an interesting um episode because they sell everything they own, including their parents, like their mother's wedding dress, which shows up in another episode, which is kind of unexplained because they still have the wedding dress after they sold it, but they try to get they think that they accidentally sold Lily's blanket. They didn't. It was just in the dryer, and basically they all get scammed. So I guess there is sort of that thing where, like, if they had worked as a group, they would have realized that it was in the dryer, or they would have not got scammed. But because they all were competitive and they worked individually, they ended up each of them getting scammed the same way. So I guess there is something here. Lincoln goes camping with Clyde to get reacquainted with his masculine side. This is a fine episode. Lincoln wants to get reacquainted with his masculine side. He realizes that it doesn't really matter, and that it's okay to not be the most masculine, camping, roughing it out guy. And that it's okay that he's picked up feminine interests from being around 10 sisters all the time. I just wish they did more with it. I just wish that in future episodes we saw more of those interests, because it almost seems like they introduced them at the start of the episode to create the problem instead of setting it up ahead of time. So, you know, the waiting game, Laurie gets a job at Pizza Arcade. I hate this. Lincoln is literally just... It's so frustrating because Lincoln literally is just like, these guys are not being kind to him. They're clearly using him, and he knows they're using him, and yet he still wants to go to their birthday party for some reason. I don't understand the logic. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The Loudest Yard is a... I don't get the point of this episode. Lynn takes his spot in football because she's good at it and he's not. And then he gets busted because it's not him. I guess it's like, don't take credit for other people's achievements, but also Lynn had agreed to it ahead of time. This was an arrangement they made, so I don't really know what the point of this episode is. It was fine, I guess. Raw Deal. I liked it, honestly. It was fun to watch. It was fun to watch all of Lucy's predictions come true in a sort of ironic way, and And they did all come true. I mean, you could say like, oh, they ended in disaster. Maybe that's because he saw the geezer, but no one saw it with him, so they didn't believe him. Or maybe it's because like a geezer is a natural disaster, a geyser. Anyway, the point is, I liked that it all sort of happened, and I liked that at the same time, even though all of the predictions were true in a sort of coincidental way, uh science, Lisa was still right. There was no like actual occult stuff going on there. So I know it was a pretty fun episode to watch. Dance Dance Resolution was kind of dumb. Fair to Remember. This was weird. I don't I don't like how Laurie's solution to her brother hanging out with her boyfriend was for her to hang out with and go on like a tunnel of love with her little brother's friend, because Clyde's like 12 and she's like 17. So it's kind of weird, and she's just dragging along his unconscious body. This is another thing that I hate about the Loud House. It is Clyde always being like incapacitated at the sight of Laurie. It's so annoying. I just want the show to like move. I want stuff to happen, and I hate that part. It's also gross. One of the boys is a funny episode. Lincoln goes to an alternate dimension, although it's all in his head. It didn't actually happen. But he goes to an alternate dimension where his sisters are male, and the only difference is that they are more violent and disgusting and gross. Which is kind of true, so I don't know. It's like this weird thing where, like, why is the point of the show emphasizing that boys are different from girls? Like, why is the whole focus of it that he has 10 sisters? Sisters are weird. Like, it's so weird. And then you put it, and it's like one of the boys, and it's like, it is pretty different, but at the same time, they're like the same people at the end. Like, I don't know, it's just such a confusing thing. Tatler's Tale, I like that Lola takes responsibility for her like actions. um Funny Business, I like that Lincoln takes responsibility for his actions. I like that he realizes that you can't entertain a crowd of 13-year-olds the same way that you can entertain a crowd of 3-year-olds. I loved watching him bomb on stage because he was being quite rude to Luan by stealing her thunder. So it was quite fun to watch him sort of suffer the consequence of bombing on stage. It was quite a good episode. Snowboard, I didn't like this episode that much because why would Lisa actually care that they're not going to school? She clearly, like, when has she ever cared about the intelligence of her siblings? And if they're and here's the thing, her whole thing was like, oh, I'm gonna pretend that I do like it and then make it bad for them so that they don't skip it. But they still ended up skipping a day, and that's all they would have skipped in the first place. So you basically made them skip a day to prevent them from skipping a day. It was so stupid. Price of Admission, boring episode. One Flew Over the Loud House. Well, this episode actually got banned because of the coronavirus pandemic. It felt very. It is more akin to a zombie sort of parody, but it felt too real. you know, where like everyone, and the thing is, like, Lenny was right this whole episode. You should take care of sick people. You shouldn't avoid them, and never, like, obviously, like, be safe. Don't like, wear protection. You're fucking Clyde was wearing a hazmat suit, for example, like, if that's what it takes. But like, you should support your siblings when they're sick. You shouldn't try and get away from them and shoot them with chicken noodle soup. But yeah, it just felt kind of real because it's like, yeah, we're all being very careful about this whole coronavirus. And they had to take some pretty extreme measures to avoid the flu. Study Muffin is not an episode that I liked. I just it was weird that all 10 of his sisters it's like everybody has Clyde syndrome. You know how Clyde reacts to Lincoln? It's like every one of his sisters reacted to Lincoln's tutor that way. And that's weird for a couple reasons. Maybe it's because Lisa's like 4 years old, but I don't see why she would be part of that. Like, if it were just like Lincoln's older sisters, then maybe it would make more sense. But I can't take it seriously when these like 4 year olds are like humana humana. He's so handsome. Like, come on, it's so goofy. Um, and then Lincoln's like, "Oh yeah, I get that with my teacher. My teacher's fucking, she's banging," and it's like, what, what is this episode? It's literally like, I guess it's the deadly sins. It's like the lust episode, you know. And his solution is just not to look at his teacher. Like, he has the Clyde syndrome. He's incapacitated by how hot his teacher is, and that's weird. Finally, we have Homespun. Um, it's really weird because this episode, and I know, like, obviously his parents have to be quite wealthy because to support 11 children, they have like a big house. They're supporting 11 children, and they're well off. Like they eat nice. They have electricity stuff. They have like water. Like they're not like wealthy. They're not rich, but they clearly have quite a lot of money. You know, they have a good income. Um, but this episode portrays them as living in like abject poverty, where like every part of their house is breaking down, which kind of makes sense if you think about like the antics that they get up to all the time. But it's so out of nowhere because we never see that. What we actually see is quite the opposite. Like Lisa explodes part of the house and it's fixed within the next like episode. So it's interesting that this episode portrays the house as being like completely like fragile and stuff. But it was a fine episode. It was like a clip reel episode where they go through a bunch of different events that happened in the past, except we haven't seen the events before, so it was still interesting to watch. Um and yeah, I mean that's season one. I hope I gave good thoughts about it, but I was honestly just kind of rambling for the last 40 minutes. I'll be back with a review of season two eventually. Overall, like, I don't think The Loud House is that bad. Like, I think kids would enjoy it. I don't think it has that much to offer for an older audience like myself. Um, so I mean, it's not great. Wouldn't recommend it, but it does have me interested. So I'm gonna keep watching, and I'll get back to you when I've finished season two. I think there's 5 seasons, so we'll have like 4 more of these videos with any luck. I'll see you later.